Welcome to another episode of Pivot and Profit, our podcast brought to you by the Quickfire Financial Pace Production. Now, in this podcast, we talk to the movers and shakers on the African continent, people who are trying to change things. And today's episode is around leadership. Who better than a person that has built it up? She's a mother, she's an author, she's a builder. She is the team lead, CEO, founder of Lead Access. Welcome to the show, Iris.
Thank you so much, Arnold, for having me.
You remember the first time we ever did a show together?
Oh, wow. That's a long time ago. Not sure I do recall it, but yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I think it was 2019.
Yeah, I was thinking so as well.
Yeah, right. We were leading an HR firm at that time. And then shortly after that, you were off to Mauritius.
Madagascar. Yeah, yes, Madagascar. Neighboring countries, yes.
You were off to Madagascar for a bit, and now you're back in Kigali. I went to talk about so many things regarding your professional journey, but I want us to go back to the top. The time I met you when you were leading ITM, the HR company, that space felt a little bit saturated, right? There were quite a few players and you needed to stand out, but you stood out for one reason or the other. How did you get into that field?
Interesting. I love to talk about how the HR field found me. I didn't hustle to get into the field. When I was just a fresh graduate, it was the first domain I, started in. I was an intern, and as so many companies with HR, it was always people who are very mature, old folks, if I may call it that way. And there I was as an intern who didn't know much about the corporate world. And that is what built me. Because when you are in the HR, you have like the careers of so many people in your hands. You get to see the high performers. You also get to see those who don't perform. And somehow their careers are in your hand. How do you shape it? How do you train them? How do you pivot their careers so that either they stay or they exit in a reasonable manner? So I would like to think that the HR field, from the start of my career, I started in 2009. And that's when I discovered really the love for people and for a job well done.
Interesting when there's something you mentioned there, and it came home where you say you have to resonate with people. Personally, I've never liked HR people, right? And the reason I've never liked HR people is I find them double-edged and not honest, right? And I think that has, I believe I speak for many people when I feel there's a relationship of, it's a love-hate relationship, but leaning towards hate quite more than the love with HR personnel. Why is the field viewed that way?
That's a very great question. And just for the records, I think we don't do a great job as HR people, and we have to admit it. And we have also to look at the history of what it was before. So it was more, and even at the time when I started, it was purely more of an administrative work. You are issuing contracts, etc. So it's more of the police of the organization. And for so many people, that concept has not changed or evolved because of the organizational culture that we see, where a CEO, instead of using their HR department as a catalyst of change or growth, will use it as, police. I want to know who's performing well, not performing well. And it becomes more now of the HR people to understand that things have changed and have evolved. We need to look at ourselves as people who are there to support the people we serve. And I love to think that our clients are employees. So if you don't look at your employees as your clients, your staff as your client, then you're missing out on a big thing. And that's where I think we fail people. And I know as well that every time I find a good HR, I'm like, oh my gosh, where are you from? I want to know what they're doing because it's amazing and refreshing to see.
How do you draw the balance, right? Because at the end of the day, you're also human beings. And with that comes the survival, animal instincts, right? It's also a job for the HR person. So if they don't go ahead, or if it's a firm and they don't go ahead to execute what the pay client is saying, what the CEO of the company is saying, CFO, they are not doing their job. How do you draw this balance? Because HR people are also human. They have bills to pay at the end of the day.
I think first is to understand what your role is in an organization. And unfortunately, most people don't really understand their roles. And when you don't have clarity on what your job requires, you will make a lot of mistakes. So I love to take a step back and look at it in a sense of, if you've been told as an HR person that your job is to hire and fire, how do you hire the best way? Because at the end of the day, if you don't hire right, you will fire immediately and you'll get yourself into problems. So there are a lot of things you have to look at in terms of hiring the right talent. And we are not always in a market where we have the right talent. Then when you don't have the right talent, it is your responsibility to either train the talent as fast as you can. And that's where most organizations will say, no, we don't have a budget to train. But there are a lot of things that the right HR teams can put in place to train in-house. It doesn't mean that it has to cost a lot of money. Everybody has to look in-house what they can do to coach and train the people. So coming back to the question of HR people are human, I think it is an excuse we hide behind most of the time to not say the truth. And I'll tell you how I find this play out. You find that the HR person is supposed to be someone that the staff is going to come to with their problems, etc. And their role now is to somehow be the advocate for this person. And now you have management or leadership that is telling you, oh no, this is what we have. We don't have performance. We need to fire. And then you have the legal that comes in. You can't fire because X, Y, Z. So that's why I like to say that good HR always have a strategy and a map, because when you don't have the right strategy on how you retain, what ends up is you become now the problem. Because people will look at you and they'll be like, you're not doing the right job.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and you've opened up kind of worms with so many of these answers. One of the things I'm personally been dealing with is I'm building out like 2 companies. And so I have staff close to 20 people in total. And what I promised myself was just have a good HR person. Because I've never experienced having a good HR lead. And that takes me a few steps back to, you talked about talent, right? There's the issue, and you mentioned, when we are in an environment where there's not a lot of quality talent, there's always the challenge of having outliers. And the outliers tend to really stand out. But outliers tend, and I was reading this book by Tony Fadell, which is called Build. And he has this chapter of how he learned on how to deal with superstar talents. And the superstar talents need to work with clearly superstar people. But when you have a superstar talent being managed by a mediocre manager, there's got to be clash. But then there's also the power dynamic in there, right? So how do you ensure that talent of that caliber, how can HR guys protect talent of that caliber while still keeping their job? Because the manager is going to push back and say, no, I want Iris fired. While at the end of the day, Iris is the fucking best person at doing X, Y, Z. And she is 2,000 steps above everyone. But for some reason, could be an insecurity, a complex here or there. They just can't keep pace.
That's a very great question. So I used to think before that being talented was enough, but it's no longer enough. And such talent...
Steve Jobs disagrees with you, but...
I know. Because here's the thing. He is Steve Jobs. He has all the privileges to think so, which we don't always have. I've seen talents like those actually fail. I've seen talents who were less opinionated, action-driven, rise to the top because they just had better emotional intelligence. And that is an area that such talents, high performers, mostly lack.
Isn't that political?
It is.
Yeah, but
it's very political, by the way.
I disagree. I'm on the other verge of the spectrum, right? I'm on the verge of the spectrum whereby I believe just put the fucking right people in the right rooms. Excuse my French. Put the right people in the right rooms, put the best talent and give them the best resources and get out of the way.
But that's the best world and it doesn't exist. It's an illusion.
Yeah, but nothing that we have today, nothing. If you look at the history of the world, and I love that I'm having this conversation with you because you're a student of the world. Nothing has been built. Nothing has been built that has a legacy that has not been built by superstar talent, that has been built by someone who played the wild game of, let me have the right emotional intelligence, let me know when to say this, let me know when to say that, let me learn, let me agree to be taught, let me go through the steps, right? Superstar talent, or the great things that we enjoy today, from the roads we walk on. When you look at tarmac, who invented tarmac, right? The iPhones, the computers, the guys who built his stuff didn't follow any of those rules.
I agree.
They did leapfrog.
I agree.
Right.
You can be unconventional, but you have to be in an environment then that allows you to. The problem is we have so many people want to be unconventional and they're under management. The best way to do is get out, exit, and find a place where you can do your best. Because otherwise, then you get into wars you'll never solve because you don't have the right skills to solve them. And that's the point I was trying to make. And another thing you realize is that not so many people are actually super talents. Most people are just opinionated and they think because they have a passion that necessarily they're innovative or they have the best idea. And that's not the case. Yeah. And I wanted to say that when you show, for instance, the example of Steve Jobs, what he was really good at, he knew exactly what he was good at, and he knew how to bring everybody else, whether they care or not, into the things that he believes in. And to some extent, that's a lot of skills.
No, true. I agree with you. But you see, just beyond someone like Steve Jobs, you look at the president of Rwanda, right? You look, I don't know, Malcolm Gladwell, Tony Fadell, or any of these guys who have built up stuff, Patrice Lumumba, Sankaras of this world. They also, in their building, when they're choosing who their management is, the people of similar character traits to them. It's Steve Jobs, it's Tony Flink, it's Tony Fadell, it's Ezra Coleman, like everyone.
But at the same time, he has got to compromise among those three people.
Oh yes, no, they have the ability to compromise, right? So, what could be your advice then for how to deal with superstar talent?
I think the best thing is to know what they're good at and what they're not good at, and give them what they're really good at. Outsource that to them completely and don't micromanage them. And then you can focus on what they're not good at and give it to someone else. And that's where actually I think such talent can get far. It's because they have people who are covering them on areas that they're really, really not good at. So that's what I would simply do. Like identify clearly what they're good at and what they're not and just let them shine.
Do you believe, and I'm so sorry, I told you we opened a can of worms going down this direction, but we'll come back.
It's okay.
Do you believe that, or do you, if you are hiring, are you going to hire someone who's like has a bit of everything, a jack of all trades? Or would you prefer to hire someone who's so good at one thing and so bad at other things? Well, where do you draw the balance?
That's a very great question. So here is my strategy. I usually will hire for attitude and train for skills, but certain position, attitude won't cut it. You need the skill for it. I'll give you an example. If I'm looking for a CFO, I'm not perhaps going to go for the one with the best attitude. I really, depending on the organization that I have and depending on the input that this position bring in. So what I start to do is defining if it's a technical role or if it's something where attitude is going to help me actually. So once you map out what the role is about, then you know exactly what to identify. But the problem most of the time is that when we are hiring, we don't even know really what we are hiring for. We will say this is the job description, and once you see in interviews, you're like, no, actually, this is not what I really want. And as someone who used to be an executive recruiter, I used to always ask this question: what are you not telling me that you're looking for? And trust me, people would tell me I'm looking for someone who's ABCD, and it was never on paper. And that is why you will find out that most jobs in the world are hired not via the platforms, but through a network and recommendation. And that is why I tell people oftentimes you've got to sharpen your networking skills, because the position that you're looking for, the deal, the opportunity is within your network. Someone that you shake hands with has the opportunity to get you to the next level.
God, those are gems. I don't know if our producer will put a hand clap to this. I want to go back to the top where we should have started this interview from. Who is Iris?
All right. That's just
Let's take it back. I think we were flying before we could crawl.
Interesting. So I love to define myself as a catalyst, a coach, and someone who challenges people to go for their best, the best potential in themselves. And I also like to call myself these days a follower turned into a leader, because I know for sure that I wasn't born a leader. I became one through the people who poured a lot in me, and a lot through actions. I'm very driven by action, and like you said, part of the journey of becoming a leader is also picking from the different experiences of life that you go through. Like being a mother has taught me a lot of things about leadership, about patience, about listening, about empowering others, nurturing and mentoring. And being also an entrepreneur has taught me a lot. Now that I have founded Lead Access, which is a company with the mission to empower leaders at all levels, I tell often my team that I'm a train and coach. So if I have to train and coach, everybody in the team has got to be able to do so, regardless if you're the reception or top. You've got to have your certain level that you can deliver on that. And I'm also an author of a book called Lead Your Way Up. Again, how to be a leader at any level. And I feel like that is what our world needs today. We need a world where leadership is not just about position. It's about wherever you're placed, you take your responsibility with the seriousness it deserves.
First of all, congratulations on the awards. Recently.
Yes.
Promise we'll be there for the next one. You mentioned something that I think humanity or people we ought to do, but is very pertinent. Our first ever guest on Pivot and Profit, Lucy Mbavazi, is very passionate about leadership and roles of leadership. But in your journey, you say you were a follower, then you became a leader. At what moment was that spark there? Or what can you take us through your journey? Is it you felt like, okay, I need to move towards distributing this skill, redistributing this skill, but being at the front of this?
So for me, the shift happened when people starting to refer to me as a leader. And I was quite shocked about it because I did not consider myself a leader. So I was still an intern and then moved the rank fast because I was really passionate about delivering results. And people come to me for advice. And that's when sometimes actually, even if we are to talk about the position at ITM, I got promoted quite into my second month joining the company. But it was just because people would say that I'm the person they look up to for advice, for coaching, etc. And slowly I started to embrace the role of, leadership is not about the position, is about impact. So if you're able to impact one person or two, that makes you a leader. And the problem we have in today's world is that we associate leadership with the position that someone has. And because of that, we don't see ourselves as a leader. If we're at the reception, if you're a driver, if you're, whatever position you hold, you see a problem, you're like, it's not me. Somebody else has got to fix it. So you keep pushing away the opportunity to serve others just because you don't have the title. And the contrary, if I see a problem, I always say I fix it. Or either I report the problem with a solution. And that is what makes one a leader truly. It's not really about the CEO title.
When you go back to those 2 months at ITM and, them coming to promote you, before those 2 months, when you look back, and I want you to look back in your archives, are there things that's built you up into this person that were fundamental to your growth? Was it at a point in your childhood? Was it around maybe your siblings or cousins or wherever you grew up that you stood out and you just wanted to get shit done?
I love that question. So I speak about it in my book, Lead Your Way Out, because I was in the middle of 2 boys, and best believe they made sure that I understood that I was the girl who was going to get beaten up, and I wouldn't take it, especially from my young brother. So I recall a story where my big brother climbs up on a tree with one of his friends, and we had a huge mango tree in our house. We had actually 2, but this one was always the juiciest mangoes. And my brother once climbed the tree with his friend and asked him to please pass over, throw a mango at me so I can also enjoy it. And it was like, well, let me test it first and I'll let you know how they feel like.
Petty?
And they were really,
petty?
yeah, they're kind of petty. Like it's sibling type of dynamic.
Yeah.
And I looked at them eating those mangoes and I was furious. And I wished in my heart that I was a boy. And for 1 second, I thought, what if I could climb that tree? And I don't know what got into me. And I was just like, you know what? Just get up, climb that tree. So I climbed that tree. And of course, the first attempt wasn't good. I had scratches all over my body when I finished, but I managed to climb that tree. And I got my mangoes and I was like, okay, right now, I know that if I want something, that mentality that I had, oh, I wish I was a boy, it was completely gone. There was something, a shift that happened in my mind. And I was definitely like, yeah, if I want something, I give myself all the means possible to go for it.
And talking about that, habits is key to leadership. When you notice any of the great leaders, they have a routine that they stick by. It's just, some people you just can't get to them before 12. Some people you can't get to them after 6 p.m. There's routine. Do you believe leadership or the great leaders have something that stands out?
I think outstanding leadership is about doing things your own way that surprises most people. And for you to get to that level, you have to be confident in what you offer. And that's what I think that most leaders have. And that's why they're able to craft or shape a certain routine that others feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do it this way. So I like to think of the time where I decided I was never going to work again on Thursdays. And I was still at ITM, by the way. And
What
I looked
Thursday?
so here's what I was looking at was in the week, if I can give all my best for 3 days, I deserve a break. And everybody's excited on a Friday, so I can come back on Friday and wrap up the week. So what I had asked my assistant at the time was to block my Thursday as a day off. So if you were to book a meeting with me, you'll find that's the meeting that I'm not available. And what that helped me was to get again a feeling of I manage time, my time doesn't manage me, which is what mostly in the workplace, you feel like you're running after time all the time. So Thursday was the day I look within. What are some of the projects that I want to continue that have been pending? Who are the people I want to network with? My lunches would always be packed and dinners because I've given myself time to look at who do I want to meet. And I also find that as a leader, one of the things I thrive to have is freedom. So the same way they say that wealthy people are free and those who are not wealthy are never free, I look at it as, how do I become that leader who has time to meet people, who has time to do things I want to do, as opposed to always being busy. And if you look at the world today, as Africans at least, we associate busyness, not business, the fact of being busy with being productive, but we're not. So you want to meet someone, they're like, oh, sorry, I can't until X number of days or weeks or months. And I love to think of, this is not what I aspire to have. And I used to look at even the company policies that we used to have around open doors and everything. How easy is it for people in your organization to access you if they want to speak to you? And in most cases, it's impossible because leaders have the most packed agendas. And that's one thing I look forward to, never having a list for my team. And that Thursday helped me somehow look back and prioritize whatever I want to prioritize. And I hope that in the next 1 or 2 years, I can move from 1 day to 2 days.
Inshallah. Provided you say that, because Wednesdays, that's my day.
Oh, nice.
Midweek, Wednesday, it's... I will look at emails. I will respond to emails. I will get back to people. But I just take that day for me. I will go to the golf course and play around. It's my day. And talking about that and habits, because you're making me, I'm like, okay, cool. The track is not very bad. We could be on track. One of the things people struggle with in leadership is pulling teams together. The ability to know that Arnold, you're good at X, Iris, you're good at B, David is the master of C, and maybe I, as the team lead, I don't know any of this, but I need to get these people to work together because it makes me achieve my KPIs, not to have that insecurity. I'm certain you've met this lots of times in among the organizations you've dealt with. How do you overcome this in a team? How do you overcome this dynamic in an organization?
I love to think that teams need to have a right dynamic of conflicts, and sometimes conflict comes with the talents that the team has. And the biggest or most successful teams aren't the ones that don't fight. It's mostly those who know how to fight well. And how do you know how to fight well? It's when you know that, hey, this is my strength, this is your strength. So how do we come to a common agreement? But that is not possible when the teams don't know what they're good at individually and collectively. So when I look at an organization and we're doing coaching and training, one of the things that I look at is, what is this team's strengths that this other team can learn more on? And you're going to find, for instance, a finance team that is always in agreement. And you find, for instance, a sales team that is always in competition. And what can teams learn from each other? As groups and individually, how do you pair people with the talent or the skill that someone else doesn't have so that they can learn it together? So it's through coaching and training that these things evolve. But I think self-awareness is what brings the clarity first.
You are touching lots of opening up lots of kinds of worms, because when largely society never wants to scratch or check what's under the rug, right? It's sweep it there. We'll deal with it at another time. I come from a background of where I believe in dealing with things. Like, it could be seen as confrontational depending on one's culture context. But if Iris, there's something I'm not happy about, we're working on, I'm not going to sweep that under the rug. I'll be respectful of when to communicate it, but I will communicate it. While, majority of society, we're going to still kiki and haha and act like things are okay, but they're not really okay until there's a blowover. How have you dealt with this, and how can we deal better with this?
That's a very great question. So in most cases, it comes again with self-awareness. You might be someone who struggles to give feedback because as a child, you were never given an opportunity to share what you think. Your parents or whoever was in charge of you was telling you what to do, and you had only to obey. And then you don't know exactly how to share your thoughts without feeling bad. So most cases, when we look at people who are unable to give feedback, they are not able to give it because they are judging themselves and they feel like it's not going to land well. So they get in the way of themselves into getting feedback. It's not always, how is the other person going to be perceived, even though that's the message they tell themselves. It's more that they don't have the ability to be open and real about that feedback. So what they do, instead of giving it to the person who deserves to hear it, they will give it to the person who it doesn't concern. And that creates a culture of gossip.
Yes.
When people cannot say the truth and they just talk about it around people's back. So what I like to tell people is, if feedback is something you cannot deliver in an open manner, try the strategy. So I developed a strategy called my ask and my contribution. Whereas instead of just dumping feedback, what you're going to do is you say something like, Arnold, my ask is that you support me in doing A, B, C, D. So number one, what you've done, you're not complaining. You are asking kindly something. And everyone loves to be asked something to do. And the second, my contribution is, you're now offering how you're going to support that person in order to get to what you want. So it's more of a, I would say, and rounded way to give feedback. It's not necessarily a sandwich feedback. You are now looking at what you really want. And most people, they don't even know what they want. They think they know what they want, but once we do this exercise when I'm training coaching teams, we realize that it takes them a second to ask themselves, okay, what do I want actually? Because you know what you're complaining about, but what do you want out of it? And it also takes boldness now to say, what I want is that you stop interrupting. What I want is that you stop doing X, Y, Z. What I will provide, or what I will contribute is give you maybe time towards the end of the meeting. So it requires to be bold, right? But that isn't something you can get to into one exercise. But the repetition of it is what gets people better. But just having that grace to know, you know what, it's okay. If I don't know how to give feedback, I can get better at it. I have to practice certain things. I have to learn from people who are bold enough to ask for what they want. And also to build that confidence that it's okay if you ask something. It's okay if you give feedback. You're not the wrong person. And there's this particular technique that I've noticed that actually helps as well when you're giving feedback. When you are seated the way we're seated, face to face, it becomes a you versus I. But when you're seated next to each other, it becomes more of the problem versus us. So when you're giving feedback, I love to tell teams, just like try that out. Don't sit across to each other. Just sit next to each other.
What's good leadership?
Leadership is self-leadership. Good leadership is self-leadership. That's how I see it. Because you never purely control others. Even though leadership, we say it's about influencing others, how can you possibly influence others if you cannot influence yourself?
I was this morning, so I have a habit. I try to read close to 60 pages a day, right? So I'll read 40 pages of one particular book, and then I'll read 20 pages of everything and anything else. So it could be a quote from here. I read the Bible and the Quran every morning. I read a page of each. One thing. So today I was reading a newsletter by a great childhood friend of mine. He's called Shem Opolot. It's called The Fix. Shem, I'm giving you a shout out. And in today's newsletter, he talked about something to do with respecting yourself. Like, the best contract you have is doing the things you said you ought to do, right? that is respecting yourself. And it so happens it's the same thing that you're talking about right now, the ability to respect ourselves. So people set targets and just don't see through them. Like you said, okay, today I'm going to work on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And a person only works on one. That is not respecting yourself. How do we get then us to have commitment? Because we can only grow in unison, right? We grow stronger together. That everyone, when you set the targets that you're supposed to set, and this even, I believe, goes into relationships, right? Husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. We said this is the plan, and this is what we're going to work on towards that plan. I believe it's okay to fail. It's 100% okay to fail. But it's not okay not to follow through with the plan and see the end result. So how do we get us to move in unison? How do you get people to move in unison as a leader?
What I love to think of is mostly that we need not to mistaken ambition and action. And most of us will be in our head. We want something, but we don't give ourselves the means to get there. And in our mind, we have a certain perfectionism that we want. And we always, often as well, don't look at the problem or the task at hand now. We want to look at the big picture. And sometimes getting to the big picture requires you to look at the problem you have right now, the target, the goal you have right now. And oftentimes, and I see this when I'm training or coaching teams, you're talking about a goal you want to achieve and there are multiple milestones to achieve. And instead of having all the eyes on stair 1, we're talking about, but we're going to face problem 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I always ask, what do we need now? And the reason I bring leadership to self-leadership is because if you're able to not have a blurred picture in your mind because you're looking at the target and you're looking at now, there's a lot of power in now. And there's a lot we can do, solve now. And then whatever problems we get tomorrow, we can solve that tomorrow. But the biggest problem is that most people are not looking at the right problem. And that's why they don't find a solution. And if you're looking at the now, you can find the now problems and the now solutions. So self-leadership to me is really that thing that I look at and based on my personal journey, and that's why I talk about being the best follower and then becoming a leader, is because I was thinking I've got to be good in the small things first, be faithful in the small thing, and then I can get to the big stuff. But most people will tell themselves, when I become CEO, when I become XYZ, then I can do ABC.
You don't build those habits then. You build those habits now.
It's too late, unfortunately. If you don't build them now, you can't. And that's why you see people who get into leadership positions and they're arrogant, they're self-centered, they're whatnot, because that's what they practice all along. Yeah.
And when do you, on this journey, when do you get to that point of, because one of the biggest fears of humanity, and I want to take it back, I want to use an analogy of a baby. Babies are fearless. They go, you're a mother of 2 beautiful boys. I believe when, you had these kids, the kids want to go everywhere and anywhere. But with time, people build fear. And that's what the environment does.
We teach them fear. I taught my kids fear as a mother of 2 sons, definitely.
Is that your biggest fear? Regrets?
I don't regret that because I thought I was doing what's best for them at the time. And even up to date, some of my friends, they will see my kids climbing, whatnot, and they're scared. And I tell them, you know what? I was taught to let them be and give them space and let go. And in order to let go, you have to let the ego. So how do you let that? Because parenting is also about control. Sometimes leadership or management is thinking about control. And you feel that if things are out of your control, then you're missing out, you're no longer in your position. So that creates a lot of fear in you as a leader, as a mother, is that you're out of control. And people will go to wars if they feel they're not in control or they're not in charge. So I like to think that as a leader, as a parent, as we have to not let our insecurities, our ego, our whatever project onto others. And there are ways you can control or mitigate that risk on projecting your fears onto others. Is really listen to your voice and acknowledge that if people or someone else in front of you doesn't have the same fear you have, do you have to warn them about if X, Y, Z, if you do this, this will happen? Or do you have the liberty to let them go find for themselves? And I want to tell you this one. Most of my friends, my closest friends, are probably 10, 15 years older than me. And one of the things that I love about them...
I feel seen.
Yes. One of the things I learned from my best friend who was 50 is that they never tried to have me learn necessarily from their experiences. They tell me, you go out and figure it out. And I'm always craving to know, but how did you do it? And they're like, I did it my way, but I don't want this way to be necessarily your way. And I think that's the beauty in leadership, to not want to frame leadership as this particular one single thing. And that is why, as leaders, we have to be careful to not nurture mini us. We have to let people be who they are. And that's why when I talk about how to become a leader at any level,
Is it
your worry? It is not a luxury. And I'll tell you why. Unless you're in military field where there's a discipline, there's a certain way to behave and do, you don't have to let go of who you are. You just have to be a better version of you.
Yeah, but something key you mentioned there, right? Discipline, right? Because discipline is key. If we agree that that's the fundamental of achieving the things we set out to do. So when you come and be part of an organization, be part of a relationship, be part of a team, there is something that needs to be achieved. To achieve that requires discipline. That, you need to do A, the other does B, C, D, X, Y, Z. Everyone fills in until you get the full alphabet, right? So if discipline is key, and there's wisdom that is being passed on of how to be disciplined, then why should there be room for indiscipline?
So most people that I know that are very disciplined are also very not disciplined. It depends on what area they are disciplined. And I would tell you, because I can be all over the place as a leader, but when it comes to certain things, my team knows what I care for. If we have a client, we're not compromising on excellence. It's got to be the best thing they've ever seen. They've got to be able to speak about it. But how do we get that there if not for discipline to deliver a certain way? And what I like to tell people is that when they see something that is well done, there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of excellence that went into it, but there was also like a mindset that was behind, that was driving that. So when we talk about self-discipline now, most people would think it's about waking up at 5 a.m. I'm not in the 5 a.m. club.
Please, stop coming at me, because you know how I roll with that.
Yeah, I am not a 5 a.m. club yet, but it's about figuring out what you need to do consistently to get where you need to be, sorry. So the consistency is what I call discipline. Okay. So if, for instance, is always consistently delivering a good job, that is being disciplined. If discipline means that you are always listening to your clients, that is discipline. So what are you consistent at shows what you're disciplined at and what you care for.
Iris, what are the habits you can't do without?
Habits. Really depends on people, but personally, habits I cannot do without is self-reflection.
And this is Quickfire. What's the one thing you look back and say, shit, I wish I'd done that differently?
I would say taking quicker decisions in leadership.
What is your biggest failure?
Trying to change people when I actually cannot. Wanting the best out of them and figuring out that, you know what, people change when they want to.
You're a fixer. What is your biggest achievement?
Being a mother. Nothing tops that.
What is the one thing you look forward to every morning?
Getting a good job well done.
And what keeps you driven and ambitious?
Seeing young women go out there and win in the world.
Iris Irumva, thank you for making the time.
It's been a pleasure.
Mother, author, educator, leader. Iris Irumva, Leader Access. Where can we find you across the social media platforms?
Iris Irumva.
Everywhere.
Simple. Yes.
Slide in her DMs. So many, and I'm coming back to the people that have reached out via LinkedIn, especially young ladies that want some form of mentorship. Slide into Iris's LinkedIn messages. I'll be dropping the handles in the notes. So thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to us. Those listening to us across all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify. Thank you. Those subscribed to the K Financial News channel. Thank you. There's been another episode of Pivot and Profit. Your host, Arnold Quizera, Aqua Ventures Fund. This is brought to you by Pace Production and the K Financial. Have a blessed day.